O Vaishnava Assembly, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here at the live studios in the Haven, which is located in Hythe, Kent, Southeast England, just a stone's throw from the English Channel. We're here, Gaur Hari and I, trying to keep the atmosphere pure by hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord as constantly as we can. Srila Sanatana Goswami, in his Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Mahima Stotram, glorifies the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and explains what it is we're doing, why we're reading this Bhāgavatam so much. It goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhāgavata Purāṇa, Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho, Kali Dvandoditaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshakshadayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin, Madguro Man Mahādana, Man Nistadaka Mad Bhagya, Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin, atini chochata kada, hanamun jagadachin mam, premna rit kantayokspura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we reach the first chapter of the 5th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the activities of Mahārāja Priyavrata, and he has been convinced by 4 Mahājans that he should take up the rulership of the universe, and now we're going to find out what happened. Beginning with text 27. Thus situated in the renounced order from the beginning of their lives, all 3 of them, all 3 of them are the sons of Priyavrata. There were 10 sons, and now it's talking about 3 of those sons. Thus situated in the renounced order from the beginning of their lives, all 3 of them completely controlled the activities of their senses and thus became great saints. They concentrated their minds always upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the resting place of the totality of living entities, and who is therefore celebrated as Vasudeva. Lord Vasudeva is the only shelter of those who are actually afraid of material existence. By constantly thinking of his lotus feet, these three sons of Mahārāja Priyavrata became advanced in pure devotional service. By the prowess of their devotional service, they could directly perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart as the Supersoul, and realize that there was qualitatively no difference between themselves and him. Purport. The Paramahansa stage is the topmost position in renounced life. In sannyas, the renounced order, there are 4 stages: Kutichak, Bahudak, Paribrajacacharya, and Paramahansa. According to the Vedic system, when one accepts the renounced order, he stays outside his village in a cottage, and his necessities, especially his food, are supplied from home. This is called the Kutichak stage. When a sannyasi advances further, he no longer accepts anything from home. Instead, he collects his necessities, especially his food, from many places. This system is called Madhukari, which literally means the profession of the bumblebees. As bumblebees collect honey from many flowers, a little from each, so a sannyasi should beg from door to door, but not accept very much food from any particular house. He should collect a little bit from every house. This is called the Bahudak stage. When a sannyasi is still more experienced, he travels all over the world to preach the glories of Lord Vasudeva. He is then known as Paribrajacacharya. The sannyasi reaches the Paramahansa stage when he finishes his preaching work and sits down in one place, strictly for the sake of advancing in spiritual life. An actual Paramahansa is one who completely controls his senses and engages in the unalloyed service of the Lord. Therefore, all 3 of these sons of Priyavrata, namely Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, were situated in the Paramahansa stage from the very beginning. Their senses could not disturb them, for their senses were completely engaged in serving the Lord. Therefore, the 3 brothers are described in this verse as Upashama Shila. Upashama means completely subdued. Because they completely subdued their senses, they are understood to have been great sages and saints. After subduing their senses, the 3 brothers concentrated their minds on the lotus feet of Vasudeva, Lord Krishna. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. The lotus feet of Vasudeva are everything. Lord Vasudeva is the reservoir of all living entities. When this cosmic manifestation is dissolved, all living entities enter the supreme body of the Lord, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who merges within the body of Mahavishnu. Both of these Vishnu tattvas are Vasudeva tattvas, and therefore the great sages, Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, concentrated always on the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva, Krishna. In this way they could understand that the Supersoul within the heart is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they could recognize their identity with Him. The complete description of this realization is that simply by discharging the unalloyed form of devotional service, one can realize his self completely. The Parama Bhakti Yoga mentioned in this verse means that a living entity, by dint of unalloyed devotional service, has no other interest than the service of the Lord, as described in Bhagavad Gita, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. By Parama Bhakti Yoga, by elevating oneself to the highest platform of loving service, one can automatically be relieved from the bodily concept of life and see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. As confirmed in Brahma Samhita, Premanjana Chudita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadaiva Ridiyeshu Vilokayanti Yang Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunasarupam Govindam Adipurusham Tamahang Bhajami. An advanced devotee who is known as a Sat or saint can always see within his heart the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Krishna, Shyamasundar, expands himself by his plenary portion, and thus a devotee can always see him within his heart. Text 28. In his other wife, Mahārāja Priyavrata begot 3 sons, named Uttama, Tamasa, and Raivata. All of them later took charge of Manvantara millenniums. Purport. In every day of Brahma, there are 14 Manvantaras. The duration of one Manvantara, the lifespan of one Manu, is 71 yugas, and each yuga is 4,320,000 years. Almost all the Manus selected to rule the Manvantaras came from the family of Mahārāja Priyavrata. 3 of them are particularly named herein, namely Uttama, Tamasa, and Raivata. Text 29. After Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana were completely trained in the Paramahansa stage of life, Mahārāja Priyavrata ruled the universe for 11 arbudas of years. Whenever he was determined to fix his arrow upon his bowstring with his 2 powerful arms, all opponents of the regulative principles of religious life would flee from his presence in fear of the unparalleled prowess he displayed in ruling the universe. He greatly loved his wife, Barhishmati, and with the intense increase of days, their exchange of nuptial love also increased. By her feminine behavior, as she dressed herself, walked, got up, smiled, laughed, and glanced about, Queen Barhishmati increased his energy. Thus, although he was a great soul, he appeared lost in the feminine conduct of his wife. He behaved with her just like an ordinary man, but actually he was a great soul. Purport. In this verse, the word Dharma Pratipaksha, opponents of religious principles, refers not to a particular faith, but to Varnashrama Dharma, the division of society, socially and spiritually, into 4 Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and 4 ashramas, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. To maintain proper social order and help the citizens gradually progress toward the goal of life, namely spiritual understanding, the principles of Varnashram Dharma must be accepted. From this verse, Mahārāja Priyavrata appears to have been so strict in maintaining this institution of Varnashram Dharma that anyone neglecting it would immediately flee from his presence as soon as the king warned him by fighting or administering light punishment. Indeed, Mahārāja Priyavrata would not have to fight, for simply because of his strong determination, they dared not disobey the rules and regulations of Varnashram Dharma. It is said that unless human society is regulated by Varnashram Dharma, it is no better than a bestial society of cats and dogs. Mahārāja Priyavrata, therefore, strictly maintained Varnashram Dharma by his extraordinary, unparalleled prowess. To maintain such a life of strict vigilance, one needs encouragement from his wife. In the Varnashram Dharma system, certain classes, such as the Brahmanas and Sannyasis, do not need encouragement from the opposite sex. Kshatriyas and Grihastas, however, actually need the encouragement of their wives in order to execute their duties. Indeed, a Grihasta or Kshatriya cannot properly execute his responsibilities without the association of his wife. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally admitted that a Grihasta must live with a wife. Kshatriyas were even allowed to have many wives to encourage them in discharging the duties of government. The association of a good wife is necessary in a life of karma and political affairs. To execute his duties properly, therefore, Mahārāja Priyavrata took advantage of his good wife, Varhishmati, who was always very expert in pleasing her great husband by properly dressing herself, smiling, and exhibiting her feminine bodily features. Queen Varhishmati always kept Mahārāja Priyavrata very encouraged, and thus he executed his governmental duty very properly. In this verse, Eva has twice been used to indicate that Mahārāja Priyavrata acted exactly like a hen-pecked husband, and thereby seemed to have lost his sense of human responsibility. Actually, however, he was fully conscious of his position as a spirit soul, although he seemingly behaved like an acquiescent karmi husband. Mahārāja Priyavrata thus ruled the universe for 11 arbudas of years. One arbuda consists of 100 million years. And Mahārāja Priyavrata ruled the universe for 11 such arbudas. Hare Krishna. Text 30. While so excellently ruling the universe, King Priyavrata once became dissatisfied with the circumambulation of the most powerful sun god. Encircling Sumera hill on his chariot, the sun god illuminates all the surrounding planetary systems. However, when the sun is on the northern side of the hill, the south receives less light, and when the sun is in the south, the north receives less. King Priyavrata disliked this situation and therefore decided to make daylight in the part of the universe where there was night. He followed the orbit of the sun god on a brilliant chariot and thus fulfilled his desire. He could perform such wonderful activities because of the power he had achieved by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. There is a Bengali saying which describes that someone is so powerful that he can make the day night and the night day and the day night. That saying is current because of the prowess of Priyavrata. His activities demonstrate how powerful he became by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna is known as Yogeshwara, the master of all mystic potent powers. In Bhagavad Gita 1878, it is said, wherever there is the master of all mystic powers, yatra yogeshwarak Krishna, victory, fortune, and all other opulences are present. Devotional service is so powerful. When a devotee achieves what he wants to accomplish, It is not by his own mystic power, but by the grace of the Master of mystic power, Lord Krishna. By his grace, a devotee can accomplish wonderful things, unimaginable even to the most powerful scientist. From the description in this verse, it appears that the sun moves. According to modern astronomers, the sun is fixed in one place, surrounded by the solar system. But here we find that the sun is not stationary. It is rotating in a prescribed orbit. This fact is corroborated by Brahma Samhita 5.52. Yas yagyaya brahmatisam britakala chakra. The sun is rotating in its fixed orbit, in accordance with the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to the Jyotir Veda, the science of astronomy in the Vedic literature, the sun moves for 6 months on the northern side of Sumera Hill and for 6 months on the southern side. We have practical experience on this planet that when there is summer in the north, there is winter in the south, and vice versa. Modern materialistic scientists sometimes present themselves as knowing all the ingredients of the sun, yet they are unable to offer a second sun, like Mahārāja Priyavrata's. Although Mahārāja Priyavrata devised a very powerful chariot as brilliant as the sun, he had no desire to compete with the sun god, for a Vaishnava never wants to supersede another Vaishnava. His purpose was to give abundant benefits in material existence. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that in the months of April and May, the rays of Mahārāja Priyavrata's brilliant sun were as pleasing as the rays of the moon, and in October and November, both morning and evening, that sun provided more warmth than the sunshine. In short, Mahārāja Priyavrata was extremely powerful, and his actions extended his power in all directions. Text 31. When Priyavrata drove his chariot behind the sun, the rims of his chariot wheels created impressions that later became 7 oceans, dividing the planetary system known as Bhumandala into 7 islands. Purport. Sometimes the planets in outer space are called islands. We have experience of various types of islands in the ocean, and similarly, the various planets, divided into 14 lokas, are islands in the ocean of space. As Priyavrata drove his chariot behind the sun, he created 7 different types of oceans and planetary systems, which altogether are known as Bhumandala or Bhuloka. In the Gayatri Mantra, we chant Om Bhur Bhuva Swak Tat Savitur Varenyam. Above the Bhuloka planetary system is Bhuvarloka, and above that is Svargaloka, the heavenly planetary system. All these planetary systems are controlled by Savita, the sun god. By chanting the Gayatri Mantra just after rising early in the morning, one worships the sun god. Text 32. The names of the islands are Jambu, Plaksha, Shalmali, Kusha, Krauncha, Shaka, and Pushkara. Each island is twice as large as the one preceding it, and each is surrounded by a liquid substance, beyond which is the next island. Purport. The ocean in each planetary system has a different type of liquid. How they are situated is explained in the next verse. Text 33. The 7 oceans respectively contain salt water, sugarcane juice, liquor, clarified butter, milk, emulsified yogurt, and sweet drinking water. All the islands are completely surrounded by these oceans, and each ocean is equal in breadth to the island it surrounds. Mahārāja Priyavrata, the husband of Queen Bharishmati, gave sovereignty over these islands to his respective sons, namely Agnidra, Idmajiva, Jagyabahu, Hiranyareta, Gritaprishta, Medatiti, and Vitihotra. Thus they all became kings by the order of their father. Purport. It is to be understood that all the dvipas, or islands, are surrounded by different types of oceans, and it is said herein that the breadth of each ocean is the same as that of the island it surrounds. The length of the oceans, however, cannot equal the length of the islands. According to Viraraghava Acharya, the breadth of the first island is 100,000 yojanas. 1 yojana equals 8 miles, and therefore the breadth of the first island is calculated to be 800,000 miles. The water surrounding it must have some breadth, but its length must be different. 34. King Priyavrata then gave his daughter, Urjashwati, in marriage to Shukracharya, who begot in her a daughter named Devayani. Text 35. My dear king, a devotee who has taken shelter of the dust from the lotus feet of the Lord can transcend the influence of the 6 material waves, namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. And he can conquer the mind and 5 senses. However, this is not very wonderful for a pure devotee of the Lord, because even a person beyond the jurisdiction of the 4 castes, in other words, an untouchable, is immediately relieved of bondage to material existence if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once. Purport. Shukadeva Goswami was speaking to Maharaj Parikshit about the activities of King Priyavrata, and since the king might have had doubts about these wonderful, uncommon activities, Shukadeva Goswami reassured him. My dear king, he said, don't be doubtful about the wonderful activities of Priyavrata. For a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everything is possible, because the Lord is also known as Urukrama. Urukrama is a name for Lord Vamanadev, who performed the wonderful act of occupying the 3 worlds with 3 footsteps. Lord Vamanadev requested 3 paces of land from Mahārāja Bali, and when Mahārāja Bali agreed to grant them, the Lord immediately covered the entire world with 2 footsteps, and for his 3rd step, he placed his foot upon Bali Maharaja's head. Sri Jayadev Goswami says, Chalasya Vikrame Balim Adbhuta Vamana Padanaka Nira Janita Jana Pavana Keshavadrita Vamana Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare. All glories to Lord Keshava, who assumed the form of a dwarf. O Lord of the universe, who take away everything inauspicious for the devotees. O wonderful Vamanadev, you tricked the great demon Bali Maharaj by your steps. The water that touched the nails of your lotus feet when you pierced through the covering of the universe purifies the living entities in the form of the river Ganges. Since the Supreme Lord is all-powerful, he can do things that seem wonderful for a common man. Similarly, a devotee who has taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord can also do wonderful things unimaginable to a common man, by the grace of the dust of those lotus feet. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore teaches us to take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. Ai nanda tanuja kinkaram, patitam mam vishame bhavam budao, kripaya tavapada pankaja, stitaduli sadrisham pachintaya. Shikshastaka 5. O son of Mahārāja, O son of Nanda Maharaj, I am your eternal servant. Yet somehow or other, I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms of your lotus feet. Lord Chaitanya teaches us to come in touch with the dust of the Lord's lotus feet, for then there will undoubtedly be all success. Because of the material body, every living entity in material existence is always disturbed by Shatguna, 6 waves: hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, invalidity, and death. Furthermore, another Shatguna, or the mind, and 5 sense organs. Not to speak of a sanctified devotee, even a Chandala, an outcast who is untouchable, is immediately freed from material bondage if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once. Sometimes caste brahmanas argue that unless one changes his body, he cannot be accepted as a brahmana. For since the present body is obtained as a result of past actions, one who has in the past acted as a brahmana takes birth in a brahmana family. Therefore they contend, without such a brahminical body, one cannot be accepted as a brahmana. Herein it is said, however, that even a Vidura Vigata, a Chandala, a 5th class untouchable, is freed if he utters the holy name even once. Being freed means that he immediately changes his body. Sanatana Goswami confirms this. Yata kanchanatang yati kangsyam rasa vidanataha tata diksha vidanena dvita tvam jayate nrinam. Hari Bhakti Vilas 2:12. When a person, even though a Chandala, is initiated by a pure devotee into chanting the holy name of the Lord, his body changes as he follows the instructions of the spiritual master. Although one cannot see how his body is changed, we must accept, on the grounds of the authoritative statements of the Shastras, that he changes his body. This is to be understood without arguments. This verse clearly says, Sajahati bandham. He gives up his material bondage. The body is a symbolic representation of material bondage according to one's karma. Although sometimes we cannot see the gross body changing, chanting the holy name of the Supreme Lord immediately changes the subtle body. And because the subtle body changes, the living entity is immediately freed from material bondage. After all, changes of the gross body are conducted by the subtle body. After the destruction of the gross body, the subtle body takes the living entity from his present gross body to another. In the subtle body, the mind is predominant, and therefore, if one's mind is always absorbed in remembering the activities or the lotus feet of the Lord, he is to be understood to have already changed his present body and become purified. Therefore, it is irrefutable that a Chandala or any fallen or low-born person can become a Brahmana simply by the method of bona fide initiation. text 36. While enjoying his material opulences with full strength and influence, Mahārāja Priyavrata once began to consider that although he had fully surrendered to the great sage Narada and was actually on the path of Krishna consciousness, he had somehow become again entangled in material activities. Thus his mind now became restless, and he began to speak in a spirit of renunciation. Purport. In Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 1.5.17 it is said, Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer, bhajan apakvo tapatet tato yadi, yatra kvava bhadrama amushikim, kovarta apto bhajatam swadharmataha. One who has forsaken his material occupations to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage. Yet there is no danger of his being unsuccessful. On the other hand, a non-devotee, though fully engaged in occupational duties, does not gain anything. End quote. If one somehow or other comes to the shelter of a great Vaishnava, takes to Krishna consciousness because of sentiment or realization, but in course of time falls down because of immature understanding, he has not actually fallen, for his having engaged in Krishna consciousness is a permanent asset. If one falls down, therefore his progress might be checked for a certain time, but it will again become manifest at an opportune moment. Although Priyavrata Mahārāja was serving according to the instructions of Narada Muni, meant for going back home, back to Godhead, he returned to material affairs at the request of his father. In due course of time, however, his consciousness for serving Krishna reawakened by the grace of his spiritual master, Narada. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 6.41, Shuchinam Śrīmatam Gehe Yoga Brashto Vijayate. One who falls down from the process of bhakti yoga is again offered the opulence of the demigods, and after enjoying such material opulence, he is given a chance to take birth in a noble family of a pure Brahmana, or in a rich family, to be given the chance to revive his Krishna consciousness. This actually happened in the life of Priyavrata. He is a most glorious example of this truth. In due course of time, he no longer wanted to enjoy his material opulences and his wife, kingdom, and sons. Instead, he wanted to renounce them all. Therefore, after having described the material opulences of Mahārāja Priyavrata, Shukadeva Goswami in this verse describes his tendency for renunciation. The words Devarshi Charana Nushayana, Devarshi Charana Nushayana, indicate that Mahārāja Priyavrata, having fully surrendered to the great sage Devarshi Narada, was strictly following all the devotional processes and regulated principles under his direction. In regard to strictly following the regulated principles, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Dandavat pranamas tan anupatita. By immediately offering obeisances, dandavat, under the spiritual master, and by strictly following his directions, the student becomes advanced. Mahārāja Priyavrata was doing all these things regularly. As long as one is in the material world, he has to be under the influence of the modes of material nature, guna visarga. It is not that Mahārāja Priyavrata was freed from material influence because he possessed all material opulences. In this material world, both the very poor man and the very rich man are under material influences, for both wealth and poverty are creations of the modes of material nature. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha. According to the modes of material nature we acquire, the material nature gives us facility for material enjoyment. Text 37. The king thus began criticizing himself. Alas, how condemned I have become because of my sense gratification. I have now fallen into material enjoyment, which is exactly like a covered well. I have had enough. I am not going to enjoy any more. Just see how I have become like a dancing monkey in the hands of my wife. Because of this, I am condemned. Purport. How condemned is the advancement of material knowledge can be understood from the behavior of Mahārāja Priyavrata. He performed such wonderful acts as creating another sun, which shined during the night, and creating a chariot so great that its wheels formed vast oceans. These activities are so great that modern scientists cannot even imagine how such things can be done. Mahārāja Priyavrata acted very wonderfully in the material field of activities, but because he was dealing in sense gratification, ruling his kingdom, and dancing to the indications of his beautiful wife, he personally condemned himself. When we think about this example of Mahārāja Priyavrata, we can just consider how degraded is the modern civilization of materialistic advancement. Modern so-called scientists and other materialists are very satisfied because they can construct great bridges, roads, and machines. But such activities are nothing comparable to those of Mahārāja Priyavrata. If Mahārāja Priyavrata could condemn himself in spite of his wonderful activities, how condemned we are in our so-called advancement of material civilization. We can conclude that such advancement has nothing to do with the problems of the living entity. Entanglement within this material world. I'll read that sentence again, sorry. We can conclude that such advancement has nothing to do with the problems of the living entity entangled within this material world. Unfortunately, modern man does not understand his entanglement and how condemned he is, nor does he know what kind of body he's going to have in the next life. From a spiritual point of view, a great kingdom, beautiful wife, and wonderful material activities are all impediments to spiritual advancement. Mahārāja Priyavrata had served the great sage Narada sincerely. Therefore, even though he had accepted material opulences, he could not be deviated from his own task. He again became Krishna conscious. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Neha Bikramana Shosti Pratyavayo Navidyate Salpamap Yasya Dharmasya Trayate Mahato Bayat. In devotional service, there is no loss or diminution, and even a small service rendered in devotional life is sufficient to save one from the greatest danger. Bhagavad Gita 2:40. Such renunciation as Mahārāja Priyavrata's is possible only by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Generally, when people are powerful, or when they have a beautiful wife, a beautiful home, and material popularity, they become more and more entangled. Priyavrata Mahārāja, however, having been completely trained by the great sage Narada, revived his Krishna consciousness in spite of all impediments. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That brings us to 7:45 exactly. And we're going to stop here and begin tomorrow with text 38. In the meantime, we will patiently wait for the reflections of the assembled sages. Hare Krishna. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai.
So first, we have a heart from Rani Fatai.
Thank you, Rani. Hare Krishna.
Rati Manjari, she says, Jai Guru Maharaj.
Jai Rati. Hare Krishna.
Raikanu Devi Dasi gives also some heart emojis.
Jai Raikon. Thank you very much.
So Devi Dasi, Hare Krishna Maharaj, and fortunate souls assembled here.
So Devi Dasi, Hare Krishna to you.
Jai Baladev.
Jai Baladev. Haribo.
It's interesting to note the astronomers believed that the sun was stationary, but now they recognize that it does move, as described here in the Bhāgavatam.
Very interesting. You should write an article. Hey Jai Baladev. Hare Krishna.
This is Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Gopakanya Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, and all assembled sages. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam.
Jai Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and His Divine Grace, who delivers the goods. Yes.
Saloni Sachi Sundari.
Yes.
She says, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Jai Sulani Sachi Sundari. Hare Krishna.
That's all so far.
Because in the Kali Yuga, the material energy is weaker. Even the material elements are weaker. Therefore, the bodies, the ability for man to do wonderful things is diminished in the Kali Yuga. And therefore, when the Kali Yuga historians and scholars and whatnot hear these things, they think it must be just mythology because no one can do something like that. But in the beginning of the universe, when it was practically predominantly goodness, everything about the material creations was more powerful. You know, the fruits were so powerful you could eat one and be satisfied for the whole day. One fruit off of one tree is all you needed to eat. And like that, all the senses, the mind, they were much more powerful. Therefore, when you hear about the activities of Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, and then you come down to the end of Dwapara Yuga, and Shishupal, who was also, I don't remember whether he was Jai or Vijay, but he was one of them. And he was also a big demon, but he couldn't do the same wonderful things as those other demons did. Because material energy is weaker. Therefore, we have to have books now, and now we have to have hard drives with our knowledge, put into the software so we can remember.
Everyone from Sarvamangala Devi Dasi.
Yes, Sarvamangala Devi Dasi, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj. When I listen to you read, my material worries subside.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. This is my goal in life, to make as many people happy as possible. Thank you. I'm just repeating what Srila Prabhupada has written, and it's magic. It's very powerful.
Peter Lawrence.
Yes, Bhakta Peter.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Jai Ho.
Myself and Bhakta Jewel tuning in whilst shutting down the Atma Lounge here in Cardiff. We are both very grateful to hear with you tonight. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you for being there. I'm very thankful that you're, taking advantage of this service, this facility, this resource.
Anandamurti Devi Dasi says, thank you so much, Guru Maharaj.
Yes, Anandamurti, and thank you.
Subbarao Rajagopalan.
Yes, Subbarao Rajagopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Pam Ho, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you, Maharaj, for bringing back the divine pleasure of Shravanam by your reading of this glorious Grantharaj. While listening to many glories of Maharaj Priyavrata, one thing stood out for me is from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 5.135, which reminds us the great potency of the holy name. Quote, even a person beyond the jurisdiction of the four castes, in other words, an untouchable, is immediately relieved of bondage to material existence if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once. End quote. Daily readings, Ki Jai Ho.
Yes, and that potency is actually going on all over the world now by the grace of Lord Chaitanya through our founder Acharya and our Shiksha Guru, Srila Prabhupada. He's the Shiksha Guru of everyone in this movement. And his power of his chanting was very great. And therefore, the festivals that ISKCON conducts all over the world and the kirtans are extraordinary. And therefore, people are now dancing in the streets. And it's going to increase. It will continue to increase. And we cannot imagine what it's going to be like 5,000 years from now. Therefore, no one should become discouraged in any way, shape, or form, because things are not increasing as much as you might want them to increase, or you might have a false expectation. Disappointments come from false expectations, nothing more. Hare Krishna.
From Phuc Weng Chiang.
Phuc Weng Chiang. Hare Krishna.
All glory to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga.
Jai, Guru Gauranga ki Jai.
Dayal Nitai Das.
Yes, Dayal Nitai.
Dear Srila Guru Maharaj, please accept my obeisance. Thank you for tonight's reading. Although I was not following the reading while looking at the text, I remember hearing how the practice of sadhana changes and purifies the subtle body, which eventually is the deciding factor on our future. Your servant Dayal Nitai Das.
Yes, that's actually right. And if a person is very honest and looks in the mirror, you'll be able to see the difference from before you started to chant Hare Krishna. There's a difference in the quality of the shine, the aura of a person. The face changes. The body actually changes from the chanting. It's actually palpable and visible.
Anandamurti Devi Dasi again. She says,
Yes, Anandamurti, Hare Krishna.
She says, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Ho.
Gauranga Gopal Das.
Yes, Gauranga Gopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Jai, Hare Krishna to you.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Haribo, Haribo.
The Bhagavatam gives account of such inconceivable material realities, like the duration of life of King Priyavrata, who reigned for millions of years, and also his driving his chariot behind the sun, and dividing planetary systems, etc. To understand the material world, fully seems to be such an impossible task. So what to speak about understanding the spiritual world and the source of it all, Supreme Lord Sri Krishna? Still, by hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from the right person and with great faith, we can simply accept and realize the reality of it all. What an amazing process that Srila Prabhupada gave us.
That was a wonderful realization, Gauranga Gopal. Thank you very much. It was very profound, because that is the way we get knowledge. Submissive oral reception. There's no other way to get transcendental knowledge. And if the mind and senses are purified and we hear with that consciousness, then we can actually get the knowledge. In these purports, sometimes Prabhupada was referring to spiritual understanding. And in the Bhagavad Gita, in that verse, Nahi Jnanina Sadrisham, where transcendental knowledge is being glorified, in the first line of the purport, Prabhupada says, when we speak of knowledge, we speak of spiritual understanding. So just the ability to spiritually understand what's going on in the Bhagavatam and to accept it as truth, that is a symptom of one who is becoming liberated. And there's no limitation, as it said in the beginning of the reading. Anyone can become liberated by hearing the holy name of the Lord and studying the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, hearing the Bhāgavatam from the proper source. You all are glorifying me because I'm reading the Bhāgavatam, but I'm just reading Prabhupada's words. That's all. Just the peon delivering the mail. That's it. I get no credit. Except that I like it. Too much.
From Rohini Nandana Das.
Yes, Rohini Nandana.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. It's an amazing point from Sanatan Goswami, how one's body changes when one is initiated. Goes to show how much goes on in front of our eyes, but speaking for myself, I cannot see it. Just have to have faith and philosophy. How can we further imbibe this into our character so that we can see devotees in the proper light? Your servant.
Well, put your mind back to the time before you knew anything about Krishna or Krishna consciousness, and remember what you were like. Then bring your mind back to where you are now, and then you will realize how much advancement you actually have made. And then project your mind into the future, and you will see for yourself that if you keep following strictly and keep hearing and chanting nicely, you will become more advanced and eventually reach the goal. Hare Krishna.
And from Gemma Rudder.
Yes, Gemma.
Thanks, Guru Maharaj. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Now I'm going to have to close today's daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. I can't sit so long in a chair, but I think if I start at 7 and end at 8, I should be able to do it. So thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you for your patience, especially during the time in these last 8 weeks when I was unable to communicate very well, very much. I deeply appreciate and grateful for your patience. And let us continue hearing the rest of the Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. See you tomorrow night, same time, same place, same topic, as we find out how Priyavrata Mahārāja went back to Godhead. Hare Krishna.